I'm Carrie Stevenson. I'm a senior educator at the St. Louis Science Center. Well, C3 stands for Communicating Climate Change, and what we did was we used citizen science projects to teach teens here in St. Louis about climate change issues. So we had two projects. One was Frog Watch, and one was a butterfly field count. So for Frog Watch, we would take the teens to a local pond, and they would record frog calls and what species of frogs were calling. And then they would upload that data into a nationwide database called Frog Watch. So we would go out once a week on a Friday night, and they would record the calls at 3-minute intervals and fill out a data sheet. Now, for the butterfly field counts, that happened in the summer because the Frog Watch project was in the spring. So in the summer, we had the teens go out to a glade. It was called Valley View Glades Natural Area, and they would do transects. So they would get in a line, and there would be a lead teen, and each teen would walk down at the same time, and they would catch whatever butterflies they could in front of them with butterfly nets. And then they would analyze what butterflies they had found. And we gave that data to a local nature group, and they shared it with the Department of Conservation. In both cases, the main thing was getting them outdoors and to learn about nature a little bit. So we wanted to teach them about climate change and about frogs and about butterflies, but we really wanted them to just learn more about the natural world and about the process of science. So we wanted just to get them outside because most of them are inner city youth. And we wanted to sort of counteract nature deficit disorder. And we wanted to increase their comfort level with the outdoors and with plants and animals. We wanted them to learn a little bit about natural history. And we also wanted them to learn just how scientists function, how scientists work. Because a lot of them, or at least a few that I've talked to, are under the impression that scientific research just means that a scientist looks something up on the internet and then they publish a paper about it. And that was shocking to me when I found that out. But so we wanted to counteract that perception and show the teens what a scientist really does, that they have to do field research or do some kind of experiment. And then they use that as the basis of their research. The teens we had, we had them for 4 years, not all the teens, but some of the teens were there for 4 years. So I had them throughout the 3-year project. And they learned, I think, a great deal about the process of science and also a little bit about climate change and how it affects them. That was another big issue, is that for many of the teens, climate change was not something that they felt really affected them or their lives. So we wanted to show them that it can affect the world around them, but also themselves living in a city. Or we want to continue the C3 project through doing citizen science with other projects, for example, some astronomy projects like Galaxy Zoo. And we have also continued citizen science projects with a few other like weather projects. And we also want to continue talking about the environment and about climate change.
Well, my name is Alberto Lopez, and I'm a museum educator here at the Science Center in Ithaca, New York. And our C3 project basically was about monitoring nesting birds and using them as indicators of climate change. And to do this, we used Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Project Nest Watch. We visited 2 middle schools here in Ithaca, and we basically had them build their own nest boxes, which they later on placed in their schoolyards or at their homes also. We also gave them a chance to meet the scientists for the Project Nest Watch project, which was also pretty cool because they got a chance to meet the actual scientists that uses the data that they would send into the Project Nest Watch website. So their learning outcome basically was that basically by following the different behaviors of these nesting birds, for example, if these birds would come into nest later that what they're usually expected to nest, we're basically trying to correlate if there are any effects between climate change and this difference in their behavior. Why are these birds coming in later, or why are they coming in earlier? So those are the questions that we would pose them, and we would have them try to relate and make those observations. So did the students see reflected in their data any ways on how climate change was affecting the birds, the nests that they were monitoring? Well, that's a very good question. And it was actually one of the biggest challenges we were facing in this project, because climate change is definitely something that you don't see happen in 1 year. It's something that scientists have been studying throughout many years. And we, to make it a little bit more tangible for them, so for them to kind of know what their data is being used for, we thought that it was really important for them to meet the lead scientist of Project Nestwatch. And he later explained how the data that they were sending him was how he was going to be able to use it to make those connections. Those connections that, not only those connections, but many other connections on how climate change are affecting birds, but also any of the other behavior observations that they might have gotten by doing their citizen science project. So that was definitely one of the trickier parts of our project, was making that connection on how their birds, the birds that they were observing, were affected. The other thing that I did to help that a bit more was that I had them compare their data, one school's data with the other school's data, to see if there were some significant differences, if there was something going on in one school that wasn't going on in the other school, just again to make it a little bit more tangible for them, because definitely climate change is a little bit complex. It's not easy for them to visualize, especially when we're trying to look for how climate change is affecting the specific birds that they are monitoring in their nest boxes. The project was great because the Science Center we're trying to get more and more into citizen science projects, and we tried this project in 2 different settings. We did this in an after-school setting, and we also did this during a classroom setting. So they're 2 different things. They're 2 different monsters. They work in 2 very different ways. So we learned a lot about that. We learned also about the limits that our participants can have, and for example, how detailed their observations could be, their interests, like do they want to continue to do this afterwards, for example. And that's why in the final year, we decided to have them build their own nest boxes and take them home. Before, we only had them place their nest boxes in school, and they would collect their data in school. Well, then we decided, no, we're actually giving them the chance to continue doing this citizen science project, and we gave them their nest boxes for them to take at home. And that definitely ended up being, we definitely had much more positive results just by doing that, because we also got their family involved in the project. So we definitely learned many things throughout the years of this program.
Hi, my name is Jesse Zito. I'm with the Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The C3 project that the museum participated in is a citizen science project that focuses on climate change. Our citizen science project focused on the temperatures of sand at the depths of different sea turtle nests on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And that temperature will determine the sex ratio of the turtle hatchlings. So if the temperature were to increase, it could throw off the ratio of the sex of the turtles. The C3 project incorporated floor programming that brought in all of our guests that came to the museum. And it also used specially trained volunteers that learned about the project, went out and did the data collection for us and brought it back. It also used several members of our education and program staff to record the data and keep the project in line and make sure that it was reset up after severe storms. I think the biggest thing that the public learned was that climate change does affect all kinds of different things. So in Fort Lauderdale, I think a big discussion is that climate change will affect the sea level. But that doesn't seem to draw a crowd to programming that we do at the museum. People maybe are oversaturated with that kind of information. And going into specifics about how climate change could affect sea turtles was a very impactful and dramatic experience for them. They're very, very passionate about sea turtles, and so discussing that this could have an effect in the long run on sea turtles really got people very interested in climate change. Members of the public came to the museum. They would pick up a box, a toolkit. They would then drive to the beach. They would use a GPS tracker to find the temperature gauges, the temperature data collecting units that were on the beach. They would use a GPS tracker to find it. They would bring it up from the ground. They would load the data into a special data collector. Then they would make sure that the site was still doing well. They would rope it off again if it needed to be roped off again. They would check all of the components, and then they would bring that data back to the museum where that data was stored, and then eventually the data would be mapped out. The museum learned a lot of things from the C3 project. I would say the main thing that we learned is how to run a successful citizen science project. We had a couple difficulties. One was partnering with scientists to take in the data, finding someone with the available time and the ability to give us the resources needed to take the data and to help us with the project was difficult. It was also difficult to maintain a steady volunteer group. Now, we had several volunteers that were very dedicated. We would have liked to expand more to families and to tourists that were in town. I would say the main thing that we learned about citizen science is the details of how to get the project off the ground and then how to keep it running. Those were the most difficult things for us. I would consider the project a success because it not only gave us a chance to participate in citizen science and have our guests participate in the programs, but it also gave us a lot of ideas for floor programming. It also gave us the ability to go out on the floor, discuss sea turtles, and discuss climate change in a way that maybe wasn't connecting with our audience before. But now with this project, it gave a very clear and fun way for families to engage at the museum in climate change topics.